Very good. Everyone ready? Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us, and obviously got an exciting announcement about the great reforms that are underway with the Queensland Police Service. One of the innovations which Commissioner Carroll's been responsible for is finding options, mechanisms for police to be more present in local communities, more agile, more modern, more progressive in how they deal with the community. And it was only a few years ago that the government announced that we would be supporting Commissioner Carroll's vision around the deployment of mobile police beats. The initial commitment was for 25 mobile police beats to be deployed around the state, and we're well on track to meeting that commitment. But today we want to go the step further, to continue the reform, to continue the way the Queensland Police Service can be present in communities. Today we're announcing we're doubling that commitment. So going from 25 mobile police beats to 50 police beats, and they'll be rolled out over the next 5 years by 2027. These mobile police beats are an amazing innovation, and I wanted to commend the Commissioner for her vision and also her commitment to reform around the Queensland Police Service and also how the police service engages with the community. These mobile police beats have been well received right across the state. I've seen them deployed at Palm Cove in far north Queensland, right down to Ipswich and the Gold Coast. They're very, very popular. They're ways that not only police can be present, but also more available to the people of Queensland for information and for also getting guidance around community safety matters and being a part of the key community safety response of the Queensland Police Service. I know that these mobile police beats have been deployed operationally when there's been particular instances or matters that have arisen to support frontline policing in their response to those incidents or matters, but also to provide reassurance to the community around the community safety presence that the Queensland Police Service provides and is relied upon by the people of Queensland. So can I commend the Commissioner for her vision. Our government's very supportive of the Commissioner's vision to reform the Queensland Police Service, to reform the ways that the Queensland Police Service engages with the community, and also continues our very proud record of supporting the Queensland Police Service with record resources, record funding, record numbers, and all of that manifests itself in examples like the mobile police beats. So I invite the Commissioner to say more about this exciting announcement.
Everyone, sincere thank you for being here this morning and welcome. And what an exciting announcement. We've been talking about this way of policing for many, many years, and when I went to government with this vision of just moving away from, bricks and mortar, particularly in those areas where we can be more flexible, government was accepting of that. So as a result, there are 25 new mobile police beats coming in the next 5 years. I was just talking to my troops about how we use them. They are extraordinarily flexible. Pull up at a railway station, in our communities. It actually draws people. It provides flexibility. It provides agility. It's standalone police. It's like a police station, but you actually just to get to move it around. So certainly is a big investment, an important investment, because it establishes those excellent relationships that we have with community to come to us at any time with anything they need from us. So please, if you have an opportunity, get a bit more information behind the scenes, and Mark is responsible, the acting deputy is responsible for this part of the portfolio, so he might want to make some comments as well. But it is a great announcement that will be 50 over the next 5 years all up. So thank you for that. I think you want to make some comments about that.
Thanks, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here for this really important announcement. What you effectively see here is a police station on wheels, and what that allows us to do, of course, is to get our police out mobile, engaging with the community. The Min touched on it before around the bricks and mortar model. This allows us to be far more flexible and agile, and probably most importantly, it's a key engagement tool to actually talk to the community and obtain information from them, intelligence from them, but most importantly, reassurance for the community. What we've seen so far rolling out across the state, across our districts, are these new facilities being deployed, and they are really, really well accepted by not only our staff, but also the community. We've seen them used in major events, particularly sporting events. We've seen them used in major investigations. and major crime matters, where it not only gives a level of comfort for our police that are actually deployed on sometimes long deployments, but also comfort for the community where they can come to a really comfortable place, tell us what their issues are, if necessary make complaints about matters and provide us with any feedback that they've got. Thank you, everyone.
Questions about beats? How will this help in regarding youth crime? How will these police beats help?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of examples about how it will help. One is the presence. There's a lot of research around when people see police out and about, it enhances feelings of community safety. So these are regularly and operationally deployed right across the state every day. It's not just something that gets rolled out for a major event. It's not just something that gets rolled out for a critical event. This is part of the roster of a lot of police districts across the state. And, many people will have seen this particular beat at King George Square, every couple of weeks, at Paddington from time to time. It is deployed right across the region, and that enhances feelings of community safety. But also, it's got all the technology to support the forward deployment of police operations. So if there is a particular matter that's arising in a particular community, this beat can be well positioned to support frontline policing responses. It's got the technology, it can live stream things, it can be used as a forward command post. So this extends the reach of the Queensland Police Service and supports officers in the work that they do in apprehending offenders like the ones you've described.
Is the government losing the war, do you think, on youth crime?
We're very proactive on this, and I see that there's some reporting today around how our tough laws have led to more young people in custody. That is a reflection of what the community has asked for, but it is also a reflection of our strong laws. We make no apologies for having the toughest youth bail laws in the nation. We've been on the public record before about saying that those tough new laws are leading to more young people in custody. That is for the safety of the community, but it is also for the safety of those young people who are engaging in very dangerous behaviour. The government will continue to be very robust and very progressive around engaging with young people and creating a robust, strong youth justice system so that we can enhance community safety. Any more about beats? Otherwise I'll go to other questions.
Just still on that.
Yeah.
So Queensland government vowed that it locks up more children than any other jurisdiction in Australia.
Well, I'm not sure about the comparisons there, but it is a fact. We've been on the record for a number of years now saying that as a result of our youth bail laws, there are more young people in custody than ever before. In fact, there was some numbers last year that there was about 100 extra young people compared to prior to the youth bail laws being strengthened. So that is a consequence of toughening laws. It's also a reflection, by extension of the other tough laws that we've got too. So, we've got among the toughest organised crime laws in the nation. We've got among the toughest child sex offender laws in the nation. These things lead to more people being in custody, and that is an expectation of the community, and it's also a record that the government stands by.
A mother of a child criminal this morning described the system as a revolving door. Would you agree with that?
We know that with a small cohort of youth offenders there is significant complexity. We also know that with the vast majority of youth offenders, once they have one or two dealings with the system, they go on and be good citizens. The government's always been very clear that with this very small cohort, this very complex cohort, that we will continue to throw everything at it. Tougher laws, which include obviously more of those young people being in custody for longer, but also more intervention programs, and the government continues to invest in that. There's record investment in that, and we won't ever give up. Even one instance of criminal offending is one too many, and the government will continue to be robust with those offenders because there should be consequence for their offending, but also conscious that there needs to be continued investment in intervention so that we can break the cycle of criminal offending.
Are you still going ahead with plans to build another youth detention centre, and why are we still seeing children held in custody in watch houses?
Sorry, what was the second part?
Why are we still seeing children held in watch houses, and why do you want to go ahead with another youth detention centre?
Yeah. I'll leave the questions around planning around youth detention capacity to the Youth Justice Minister, but I know that people have been on the record around looking at capacity. Because of our youth bail laws, the toughest in the nation, more young people are in custody, which means that there are obviously pressures on the system to enhance capacity of youth detention centres. Let's make one thing really clear, and I know that there's been some commentary around this. The government has never said that there won't be young people in watch houses. It's a part of every criminal justice system in the world that there will be people placed in watch houses for a period of time. That is the normal process. You know, when you are arrested, you go to the watch house pending your first court date. Once the court makes a decision, if you are remanded, you go back to the watch house, and then you are placed in a prison if you're an adult, or a detention centre if you're a young person. That is part of the normal process. Well, there will be from time to time instances where, because of the process with transferring any prisoner, whether you're a young prisoner or an adult prisoner, into a detention centre or a prison, that there will be time. But the commitment from the government and the police service and all of the custodial agencies is to move people from the watch house to their place of detention as quickly as possible. And in the vast majority of cases, that's what's happening. The vast majority of cases, young people in watch houses who are remanded by the court end up in the detention centre in a relatively quick period.
When we're talking about this small cohort of youth offenders, are we talking dozens, hundreds? Because I know in the north side in particular, certain streets just keep getting hit and hit and hit, and the police have said to residents there's pretty much nothing they can do because they either can't find them, or once they are found, they get a slap on the wrist more or less, and then they're back out stealing cars, breaking into homes.
Yeah.
What number sort of would you put on that small cohort?
Yeah, well, this has been a public number. It's not a new number. Around the state, we're talking about 400 kids. It's the top 10% of offenders. They are particularly complex. They come from complex backgrounds, and whilst that's not an excuse for their offending, it's an explanation for their offending. That's why the government's strengthened the laws. That's why more of them are being held in custody for longer. You know, there was a report just today talking about how many extra are in custody now. So there is strong consequence for that cohort of offenders, but we know that because of the complexity in their lives and the complexities associated with their offending, we need to keep working towards those interventions to try and break the cycle, and that's what the government's doing. That's why we're being very robust about engaging with the youth justice system.
Because jailing them actually doesn't work, does it, Minister? Is that why we've got more and more youth offenders and we can't break that cycle?
Well, that's not necessarily entirely accurate, because if you need to stop offending of people for their own safety and the safety of community, detention does work. Detention does stop their offending. What you have to do, and this is what the government's doing, pulling all the levers, is that when you detain them, you also have intervention programs. And that's what we're investing in and continue to invest in, and that's what we continue to remain committed to.
Generally speaking, though, when you say we'll leave it to the Justice Minister about whether a detention centre should be built, as a government, though, if there is so much backlash already and there is proof that they don't work, would it be wise to go ahead with the construction of a multi-million-dollar detention centre?
Well, what the community is saying is that they want consequence for action. The government responded and strengthened bail laws, and that's led to more people in custody. I can talk about the adult correctional system. Again, people wanted consequence for action. A couple of years back, we created a new offence, strangulation, in the domestic violence situation. That's led to hundreds and hundreds of more people being in custody. No one is suggesting that law be repealed. In fact, everyone wants robust approaches when it comes to responding to perpetrators of domestic and family violence. So when you toughen laws around domestic violence, like the instance around strangulation, or when you toughen laws around youth justice or pedophiles or bikies, then you will have more people in custody. And I don't think there's anyone in the community who is saying we should roll those laws back. In fact, the community is saying that that is an appropriate consequence for very bad behaviour, for offensive behaviour, and for bad offending that has an impact on the community. So, hang on, Tim. So, in the instance of adult correctional systems, which I have responsibility for, we are investing in the infrastructure. We've added thousands of more beds, and there's a new prison being built at Gatton, which will deliver 1,500 beds in about 18 months' time.
You talk about more police and your tougher laws. Do you think the Queensland public is going to buy that's working when they keep on seeing houses broken into and cars stolen by young offenders?
Yeah, well, there is complexity around that offending. That's why the government's responding. And, you know, I think people understand that there is complexity about why people might offend. They accept, as I do, that it's not an excuse for people offending, but it does provide an explanation for why people are offending. So that's why we're investing in the front end, tougher laws, more police so we can apprehend the offenders, more detention capacity in the adult system, but also at the back end, you know, those intervention programs to break the cycle, and also those early intervention programs around supporting families so that we can raise better children, you know, and divert them away from the criminal justice system to start with.
Did you read the letter from Steve Marshall? Listen to the audio.
So that matter was dealt with by my office, and I've been briefed on the process that was followed there. Can I say the proper process was followed? The matter was appropriately referred, and now it's before the CCC and it's being investigated.
Is it referred back to the QPS because you had welfare? It was
Well,
actually referred back for further investigation.
So the proper process was followed, and as a result of that proper process being followed, the matter is now before the CCC.
Have you received permission of inquiry?
Yes.
When's the public going to
No.
read it?
Sorry?
When will the public get to read
After
it?
Cabinet considers it.
Are you concerned that there was a leak essentially in the Australian today reporting what it said?
Well, I haven't seen the basis for that reporting. You know, the government's received the final report. The government will consider it. It'll go to Cabinet.
When will you read it?
I'm reading it now.
And what have you gleaned from it?
I'm not
initially?
telling you because I'm reading it now and it'll go to Cabinet.
I mean, it's a pretty significant report, though.
It is, and that's why it's going to
members of
Cabinet.
the public.
And that's why it's going to Cabinet.
And it has been open, like the public were taken along this journey.
Yes.
You're watching the hearings. What's your initial assessment of it?
I'm reading the report now. I haven't finished reading the report. It'll go to Cabinet, and Government will say more about it once it's gone to Cabinet.
The
Last
leak
week
is
you
true.
said that Ray Rowley should resign from the Queensland
Yes.
Police Service over sexist comments.
Yes.
Does your belief that police should resign extend to racist comments as well?
Yes.
What about Steve Golczewski? You know, we have members of the Queensland First Nations reference group say he made racialised comments towards them, that he pointed the finger at an elder, and he used the words "you people," referring to their input with regard to the QPS. Is that acceptable?
Look, I understand that there's different interpretations of that, and I understand that matter's now been addressed.
So do you have a double standard there
No.
with regard to racist comments?
No, I understand that there was some misinterpretation about that. I know Steve Golczewski very well, as do most Queenslanders.
Members of the First Nations reference group don't believe there was misinterpretation with regard to those comments.
Well, I understand that the matter's been
Are you
addressed.
saying they can't be trusted to relay comments?
I understand the matter's been addressed.
Minister,
Have those police officers been stood down here at the centre of those recordings of the watch-out?
I understand that the matter's being investigated. You know, my understanding as well is, whilst there's an investigation underway, that those officers need to be identified. And my understanding is, the advice I've got is that they have not yet been identified, but obviously as part of the investigation, those officers will be identified and a further investigation will be conducted around that.
Those recordings have already, one of those recordings has already been investigated. The police gave one watch house officer in relation to one of those recordings local management guidelines.
Well,
I mean,
all I've been advised on is that the matter came to my office. Proper process was followed. It's been referred to the CCC and it's now being
Do you
investigated.
think those officers should be sacked though, based on what they said, given those recordings and
Well, the
comments?
behaviour is abhorrent. It's totally inconsistent with my experience of the high standards of officers of the Queensland Police Service, totally inconsistent with the values of the Queensland Police Service. So those people shouldn't be part of the organisation, but there needs to be an investigation that goes through to identify who they are and to allow people the proper process around natural justice and a normal investigative process.
Is it pretty concerning that they haven't been identified yet?
Well, I understand that some of the evidence that has been brought to light has only been brought to light recently, so that is why I expect there to be a thorough investigation as a result of those matters being referred.
These conversations, the person who reported the conversation says he went up the proper chain of command to let his superiors know. How then have they not been identified when this was raised in 2019?
Yeah, well, the advice I've got is that as a result of my office following the proper process, the matter's now being investigated by the CCC.
These recordings show, though, that the culture in the QPS hasn't changed. Are you worried that it puts your position at jeopardy, given that you're the leader of the department?
Well, I'm very proud of the work that the vast majority of members of Queensland Police Service does every single day. You know, and I think that's the experience most Queenslanders have with the police service.
The
you know,
is true.
Sorry.
That Caterina, that the report is critical of Caterina Carroll, who's willfully ignorant. So she's
well, I haven't seen that information. Government will consider the final report, and we'll say more once Cabinet has considered it.
Still have your confidence?
Absolutely.
Commissioner, if we could ask you a couple of questions.
Any more for me, though? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Thank you.
this has been quite a wild few months for your position. Have you been speaking to ministers about your position and if you'll be holding on to that?
Yeah, definitely. I speak to my minister all the time in relation to many issues, and the minister says that he fully supports me in my role. As you know, I came in with a reform agenda, and that reform agenda will continue. It has been an extraordinarily difficult time. Reform takes, in the best environment, anywhere from 3 to 5 years just to get the systems, the processes, the training, the education in place. And even though we were hit by COVID for many years, we actually started that reform agenda. So I am looking forward to the report to not only just reform, but to transform the department. The stuff that we heard in the Watch House is truly abhorrent. It's tough to stand here and listen to that being said. I know that, you know, I have apologised, and I apologise again to the victims internally and externally. Leadership's upset about it. Most of the good people who are good people in my agency are upset about it. They can't fathom how people can speak that way. And as the Minister has indicated, as soon as it came to light, it has come into the agency and gone over to the CCC to be looked at. There are officers in my agency, because I travel a lot and speak to them, who are so upset about what they've heard, because they are so passionate about looking after their community. And even other officers who have clearly said to me, ma'am, it's difficult to walk out in the street at the moment.
Given that, do you
Because
think
we are...
Do you think those officers, Commissioner, should be sacked for what they said?
We need to do the investigation obviously thoroughly. The matter is with the CCC, but my view is if you're going to make those remarks about anyone in such a racist manner, they should not be in our organisation. They do not align with our values. It is completely unacceptable. We want to be the people that we serve. We want to reflect the people that we serve. The evidence clearly shows you the more diverse you are, the more inclusive you are, the more successful you are as a department. So if people don't align with that, they need to move on, and there will be processes in place to investigate this and take the strongest possible action to make sure that they are removed from the organisation.
Have you or anyone else reached out to Stephen Marshall
Look, we will be definitely. He has been away on a period of leave, so that is... from what I understand, I'll have to check on that, but certainly that is the process.
When did you first hear about the case?
Last week on the Friday, and certainly as soon as I heard, to make sure that it was immediately investigated, immediately at the CCC and into...
But doesn't this speak to the bigger problem, broader problem within the QPF? This was raised way back in 2019. It went up the chain of command and still nothing happened.
So I am briefed that may have been the case, so I've asked to follow that up and see where that was at. So I do need to get further advice on that. So if it was briefed up and that is the case, yes, that is a concern. We know that the new discipline process, which has been in for 3 years now, has been attested and found wanting, particularly in the area of LMR. So this is what has been immediately adjusted. So highly centralised, consistency over the whole process, and that needs to be done. And that's a part of the reform. You know, initially there was very much a manual system to get across many of the reportings within ethical standards. That now is automated. So, but that also is a part of reform. And that's what it's about. You know, we're third year into it. It's been a tough 3 years. And I know people make light of, you know, now in hindsight, you know, we had COVID, Well, my department was at the front of COVID for 2 years. I had 1,200 people some days on borders at airports, and if you look at the report, and I'm happy to put it out there, intercepting millions of vehicles, tens and thousands of aircraft, and we still managed to push out a lot of training, a lot of systems changed, new leadership development, new performance systems. We still managed to do that. And I think, you know, people are tired, and we've still managed to achieve all of that, and we will continue with this because it's incredibly important.
Other departments like health, though, they were under incredible strain, and we don't see recordings coming out and issues around culture with members of the public being spoken.
Yeah, definitely. And in that initial part, and I'm talking, Josh, about that initial part, it really was the Queensland Police Service initially. And, you know, this obviously health towards when COVID eventually did get in took up a lot of that slack and incredibly busy. But yeah, it is a concern, an extraordinary concern that within the system that, you know, this hasn't been picked up. But that is what reform is about. And I speak to the new discipline system implemented in October 19 and just really needs to, you know, it's been tested, and it certainly needs to be tested in the future. I will review that with our partners, and that is the two unions, NCCC and QPS, who, you know, worked for 2 years to bring that in. So there does need to be work needs to be done, but certainly I think we need to flip it to celebrate culture and inclusion and positivity and diversity, and this is where we're getting to. When I established the First Nations unit because I thought it's incredibly important. And as soon as that unit was established, we did a survey across the entire organisation about cultural capability. We couldn't get together for training, so we immediately did online training, and now we've also extended face-to-face training in terms of cultural capability. So all of this has been done in the last few years, and we will continue to do this.
When did the QPS refer this matter to the CCC? We were trying to get the timeline yesterday.
I will get the timeline for you. Exactly.
Was this matter referred to the CCC? Is the CCC now investigating, or are they simply providing oversight for everything?
When it's a certain category, it goes to CCC, and there's a certain period of time that they can make that decision. But I can get the information back to you as soon as I've got that.
Commissioner, do you have any plans to step down or not renew?
I don't have plans to step down. I've come to this agency with a reform agenda. I need to continue that. And to the point where I have said, it's tough. You know, I was in the QFES for 4.5 years. 4.5 years of absolute reform around culture, around bringing that department together. And I left at the 4.5 year mark, and I still had a lot of work to do.
Do you feel like you're being white-handed by perhaps members of the union, others in the QPS?
I do think that we're all there for the right reasons. You know, all good people, which is predominantly the people in my agency, want the same outcome here. But those who don't align with that, those who are racist and sexist, misogynistic, you are in the wrong place. You should not be in our organisation. And we are doing a lot of work to even go back to look at all of the cases from before to make sure that we pick up on any that might have fallen through those gaps, and also to make sure that we can address, you know, issues that need to be addressed.
Do you think that you can handle things differently, Commissioner? There's been reports stating that the Community Inquiry report has been some criticism of your leadership.
Yeah.
Have you had time to reflect about what
I think you should always reflect as a leader. It's actually tough taking criticism. I think that's very natural. But I've always been a leader that will accept criticism, because I think you need to be very open to that and actually learn from it and become a better leader. We've always known we've had issues, and we've been really upfront with that. And you know, that's tough. You know, we're upfront. There are issues that we need to address. We're upfront that this is completely unacceptable, and we're upfront that we are actually going to not only reform the work that we've already started, but transform this agency. I want the public to know that predominantly there are good officers who are also hurting. But what you have heard is completely unacceptable.
If culture starts at the top, isn't there an element here of responsibility that does fall on your shoulders?
Yes, definitely. And I take that responsibility, and it starts at every level of all the organisation. The tone from the top all the way through the organisation. And I think you look back and you think, well, you know, I could have done that part better. However, we've done this really well. And it does take, you know, even like when you look at systems and procedural training, procedures and training, it actually does take a while to get that right. So some days it'll be 2 steps forward, 1 back, and it takes a significant amount of time. And the other issue being that it never stops. You know, it should never stop. I came back in, implemented, you know, performance reviews, new leadership training that's more current, cultural training, DV training, new systems. But it takes time, and it's not an overnight solution. But I ask that you bear with us, because we are doing an extraordinary amount of work to make sure that we're not here having this conversation in the future.
There are reports
the Australian this morning, do you think what positions
I do have the support of the Minister, and I think that's incredibly important. The Minister knows my history, the Minister knows my past evidence of reform, and I think that is incredibly important. And the Minister also knows, and I'll let the Minister talk to it, the reform that I've done to date.
There are reports in the Australian this morning that you were willfully blind to some of the racism in the force. Do you think you will survive the release of the report from the Commission of Inquiry?
I'm not willfully blind. I'm a CEO in charge of 17,500 people. 17,500 people.
I'm just referencing the report.
I'm just saying, definitely not.
Do you think you will survive the release of the report?
Well, I'm hoping to survive. I actually believe that I'm the person to take this organisation forward.
Have you offered the Minister your resignation?
No, I have not. No, I do believe that I'm in the right position to take this organisation forward, because I have had extensive experience in reform, and I have commenced extensive reform. So that is incredibly important to take that forward.
Do you have support of the Premier?
I'm sure the Minister will talk to that and speak to the Premier. So I haven't spoken to the Premier this week.
Commissioner Ray Rawida, how long will he be keeping his job? Are you still seeking legal advice about what to do?
It's incredibly complex situation. I, of all people, have to act within the bounds of the law and the industrial arrangements that we have in place. So I have asked for a lot of advice on this, and it might come to a situation that if I can't do something from that aspect, what else can be done? The issue is, it is a very complex area. I, of all people, have to act within the advice that I get, and also within the bounds of the law more than anyone. So there is work to be done yet.
It does seem bizarre though, like if someone from a big finance company was in a conference and yelled something similar out, they'd lose their job immediately.
We all operate within different legislation and policies and procedures. Private organisations act very, very differently to the public organisations. We all have our industrial arrangements, we all have different policy settings, we all have different legislation. So that is what I have to act within, the legislation.
Do you believe police should be held to a higher standard?
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely.
Well, the opposite, so I mean the discipline system is very substantial.
Yes, so definitely. We see these examples in the community. That's unacceptable. But the police who administer the law should act to a higher standard. That's exactly right.
Commissioner, it wasn't too clear before.
Sorry?
It wasn't too clear before. The service was not trying to reform and transform. The officers who made those comments in the watch house have a place in your service, yes or no?
No, sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry about that.
That's right. The service you're trying to transform and reform, the officers who made those comments in the watch house have a place in your service, yes or no?
No, they don't if they've made those comments. That's unacceptable. I mean, that's the issue. I haven't the full extent of the investigation, but I will get across that. But certainly if it is as it's been reported, it's unacceptable. They do not align with who we are, who we represent.
Have they been identified as far as
No, I understand they haven't, so that is the issue at the moment. So there is an investigation that is happening at the moment, so I just really need to let that investigation happen.
Does that surprise you that the police can't even identify who they are?
Well, we need to get more information, because, 2019, hundreds of people could be working, through those areas, so it's just really important to really do a thorough investigation.
How many First Nations people are there in the QPS?
So I will get you the exact numbers. It does sit around at the target, so I'll get you those exact numbers.
Do you think there needs to be a change, perhaps, in the approach to recruiting police officers in that recruitment phase?
So we do a lot of work with entry for First Nations and from our call community. It's actually some really groundbreaking work across the world, and we initially, started that in the QPS many years ago. So it is an excellent program. We have First Nations recruiting officer whose job is actually to recruit as many First Nations as we can. So I do believe that, there are really good, solid processes in place in that front end. And look, from my point of view, we have to reflect the community that we serve. So, it is from the culturally and linguistic backgrounds, it is from the First Nations background, and to the comments earlier, that enriches the organisation as we move forward.
So is it a problem that there are no First Nations people at the rank of inspector or
Yeah, it is at the rank of superintendent. Interestingly, I was in Victoria the other day. Their highest ranking First Nations was an inspector. So we're all obviously doing a lot of work in this space. It is incredibly important. It's incredibly important when you talk about diversity, even in terms of, women in the organisation. It's not to sit at the bottom end of the organisation. They need to move through the leadership positions. And case in point, when I was first at QFES, there were no women in the senior executive. When I left, they were at 8. When I came back to the QPS, there were 2 women, and now we're at 10.
You're referring to Kerry Johnson when he's referring to someone at the rank of superintendent?
Yes.
Because I understand he doesn't identify as an Indigenous person. And that came out in the inquiry. It was spoken about in the inquiry, so he doesn't identify as an Indigenous person. He discovered later in life that he had some ancestry. I mean, is it disingenuous to be saying that that person does not identify as an Indigenous person is ticking the box for the QPS with regard to someone at the rank of superintendent?
I'm not going to speak on behalf of him. I mean, that's up to him. But, Kerry was purposely put in First Nations, the unit that I created to lead a lot of this change, because he would understand, the history and the issues, and that is a good thing.
Members of the Queensland First Nations reference group have spoken to the fact that someone who does not identify as Indigenous cannot speak for Indigenous communities. They cannot speak to the cultural concerns of Indigenous people with regard to the QPS. They feel it is incredibly inappropriate for someone like that to be representing themselves as someone who can.
I won't speak to Kerry, but there are many, I have Indigenous people, First Nations people in the First Nations unit for this very reason. I asked for the reference group. The reference group is incredibly important to work with the QPS. This is the very reason I've got them working with the QPS.
Do you have any comments in relation to Steve Palaszczuk's treatment of the reference group and their concerns that he was aggressive and used racialised language towards them?
So I've obviously spoken to Steve about that. He is going to write to the reference group. Steve is, and you would all know him publicly and throughout his well over 40 years in the organisation, he is a person of the highest integrity. Can I please finish? He said that he feels that a lot of what was said was misinterpreted. He is not in any way rude, and he is incredibly upset that it was taken that way, and upset that they felt that way.
Isn't this the broader problem, though? Isn't this the broader problem? Aren't we, we're good working people who have done and said things that are inappropriate, or that, those First Nations people in that reference group absolutely, to a person, believe that those comments were incredibly offensive towards them. I mean, isn't this part of the issue? This is not about how people interpret comments that weren't intended like that. Police need to act in a way that's culturally sensitive towards First Nations people. And if your leadership can't do that, then that's obviously evidence of a broader problem, right?
What Steve did was not intentionally. And we are all doing cultural capability training and getting better at cultural capability. The reference group is incredibly important to me, to guide us, to converse with us, to have the conversations that we're having. A group that I wanted from a unit that I started. I mean, this is incredibly important. So the reference group is important. We've already met once. We're meeting again very shortly. I am very confident that when we work with the reference group, when the First Nations unit takes forward the work that we're doing, that we'll be in a better place as a result. As I said, not just to reform, but transform the organisation.
Commissioner, can I just ask you one thing?
Just on Ray Rowita, leadership only took action after it became public. Why didn't leadership take action?
Leadership did actually take some action in terms of managerial guidance. He is on leave. I'm just looking at what other action can now be taken.
Commissioner, do you commend what Steve Marshall has done here? It's pretty brave what he has done, and will you be phoning him personally?
So I think it's excellent. I mean, that's exactly what we want to do, is encourage people to come forward. I mean, and that is the positivity, isn't it? It's that you can have the courage, come forward, that it's acted on, and that we actually address the issue.
Commissioner, Steve Marshall is listening to the live stream right now. He wants you to know that he gave the names of those police to the Commissioner's inquiry. How is it that police still don't know who these officers are and they are still working in Watch?
So I don't know whether those names have been transferred to the organisation, but I will definitely find out why and get someone to contact Steve on that. So thank you.
Commissioner, has police leadership had an unjustifiable confidence in the QPS at large despite an evidence of corruption?
Oh, sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yeah.
Just sorry.
Has QPS leadership had an unjustifiable confidence in QPS at large despite the evidence we've seen of culture issues?
I think a leadership in QPS, leadership everywhere, is just doing what we believe is correct. We knew there was issues and we are all appalled by that, and that's why the reform has commenced. That's why we've recognised that we do need better performance, better cultural training, better leadership training. A new framework in leadership was just commenced a year ago. So I believe the leadership has done everything possible to address the issues, but needs to keep addressing the issues.
Do you think, though, the seriousness is underestimated?
More people have come out, which I think is absolutely tremendous, because that's what it's about.
People that are brave enough to speak out. I mean, I imagine there are dozens of others who are brave.
So we are actually encouraging many people to come out. We know that many have. A third of reports against police are by police. So we do know that police are very open to complaining about police. That's exactly what we need. I do believe, and I created a unit, CCE, to look at not only complaints coming in, but to also be proactive in terms of what's happening in the workplace. So if we do see issues, to take a team of experts in to work with them. So not only a preventative measure, also a responsive measure. In hierarchical organisations such as police and defence, where there are many layers, there are 10 between myself and a constable, there is that reticence, and if you don't have a supportive system, there's even more reticence. So that's the reform. That's the reform, to say, come forward, be confident in coming forward, and we will address these issues.
And you mentioned that you said you were hoping to survive the release of the report.
Yes.
But you said you've got the confidence of the minister. You believe you're the right person to lead the organisation. Well, what could change between now and then?
Well, that's just a comment. I definitely do know that I have the support of the minister. I do believe, in good faith, reform has started in earnest for many months. And the second I walked in from when I did that original review, and also changing the way that we deliver services to Queensland. I do believe that I need the opportunity and should have the opportunity to continue that reform. Reform's difficult. Reform is extraordinarily difficult, and we're at, I'm at the 3.5 year mark, and COVID was not an excuse. COVID was a very difficult time where we started reform, we stopped reform. where we started training, we stopped training. So these issues and a worldwide pandemic actually slows the progress, and it definitely did. But it's on in earnest. And
the officers involved in the legal reportings, will you be urgently finding out who they are?
Yeah, definitely.
They could be on the job today, couldn't they? They could still be working.
They may be, but like I said, there is definitely investigation. I'll make sure that we follow up immediately to find out who they are and where they are.
And then what, will we have an answer today?
I don't know, but I will get back to you. Yeah.
And on youth detention, are there capacity issues at the moment? We're still seeing young people held in watch houses.
So young people are held in watch houses temporarily. That is the process. So we do have that happening around the state. We work very, very closely with youth justice to move them through as quickly as possible. It is a close relationship. We have a state custody officer that reviews every day how many people come into the watch house, and then obviously move them out as soon as we can.
Is it acceptable if they're held there, young offenders, for more than a week? What's the cutoff?
That is rare. It is actually very rare. The normal case is just a few days, so that's what we try and achieve. Certainly, I think we would all love to live in a world where a young person didn't come into the watch house, but it is a transitional process, and it's very rare for a child to be there in 7 days. But as I said, we do have an excellent relationship with the Youth Justice Department, and we move this through very, very quickly.
Do you need another detention centre?
Well, that's difficult for me to comment on because I don't know how many actually in youth detention at the moment, but certainly from a custodial perspective in watch houses, we move them through very, very quickly.
Quick question for the Deputy Commissioner, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Deputy, can you tell us when you last spoke with Stephen Marshall?
Early October.
Early October?
Yep.
And he relayed to you in that conversation concerns that there were reprisals against him for making earlier complaints?
So Mr Marshall outlined a number of issues. I'm not going to go into them. Some of them were actually private, relating to him. So all I'll say is I spoke to Mr Marshall for a considerable period of time. We parted on very good terms. He was very respectful. I asked him what he needed. I made sure he had support, which is occurring, and making sure that whatever we can do to help him through issues that he's facing, that's in train.
He said he asked to be transferred as protection against ongoing reprisal and that you rejected that suggestion. Is that true?
Sorry, just say that again.
He
asked to be transferred.
For a transfer as protection against ongoing reprisal and that you rejected that suggestion.
So his employment arrangements are essentially the conversation he had with me. I don't want to go into it in total because some of it doesn't actually relate to internal matters to the QPS, so I need to respect his privacy. We have a process for people who need or want to be transferred. At the moment, Mr Marshall is not in the workplace. He's on a period of leave. I won't go into that for privacy reasons. I understand the interest in this. I understand what your questions are, but I have to be really careful and really respectful of Mr Marshall's privacy. So while I'm having a conversation with him over a month ago to establish what his issues were, standing here before you today and outlining everything that we spoke about is a really, really sensitive topic.
Well, perhaps we could speak more generally. Someone who comes to you and alleges that they're subject of ongoing reprisal within the workplace, why is it possible for them to be transferred out of that work environment to somewhere else?
Well, in certain circumstances it absolutely would be if that was the case. So again, going into private conversations with Mr Marshall and breaching the privacy I had with him, I don't think that's the right thing to do. You'll have to ask Mr Marshall, I guess, himself about what his concerns are, and if he's prepared to talk to you, that's fine. But I'm not prepared to disclose every single conversation I had with him. It was a very, very lengthy conversation.
Did he raise the allegations of racism?
He's raised a number of issues that he tells me were raised earlier.
And so did you do anything about those allegations at that time?
Yes, I did. I followed a process. Yep.
What did that process involve?
Well, the process involves having issues that are raised assessed and making sure they are not new. So where a matter has been raised and it's not a new matter and it's already been assessed. Now, what I will say is Mr Marshall has not been in the workplace for a very, very long time. So the issues that we discussed were not new. They were not from the last 12 months. The issues that he raised were quite lengthy, quite old. The information provided. Now, what we've seen, of course, it's on the public record that Mr. Marshall or someone has provided some recordings. I was certainly not aware of those recordings at that point in time. Not aware at all.
Commissioner, I just have another question.
Sorry.
On something else. It's about the white supremacist group, the European Australian movement. Are they being investigated? We understand that left flyers in mailboxes trying to recruit people to join this white supremacist group. Is that illegal, and are they being investigated?
Yeah, no, so if we do, I can't comment on them specifically, but certainly if we do get a complaint like that, which we sometimes do, that is definitely investigated. You know, we have grave concerns about any supremacist group, and it is would be trying to drive, people joining are groups that, shouldn't be in existence. So definitely if there are complaints made, if we don't know of it, they will be looked at. Okay.